Tonight, I would have a conversation with a Misericordem-type, Frank, and I'm thinking of making a series of conversations over Skype with a person of each of the primary types. But so far, this is the first test, so we'll see how it goes. But I think it could be useful to actually get to have a conversation with each of the type and not just go by descriptions. And so Frank, I have talked with Frank before, and in that conversation, he thought he was a fiducian, and I had talked with him on in the comment fields on YouTube, and I didn't really have any reason based on that to doubt that he was a fiducian. In fact, I thought he was a fiducian too, because he talked very much about, we talked about cosmic stuff and things that he seemed to be very eager and ready to believe in and have conversations about very sort of spiritual and cosmic stuff that seem to resemble the typical fiducian pattern. But when he appeared for the first time on Skype, I was a bit surprised, because I thought that your energy was not exactly what I expected. Fiducian tend to be a bit more verbal, a bit more talkative, and much more, I would say, confident. With you, there was a kind of, you were more sort of quiet and sort of obedient in listening to what I was saying, and sort of ready to be kind of the disciple, or how you would put it. While a fiducian would be more like, they would approach you more like an equal, and very often they want to share their own ideas and exchange ideas in a way that was not the way you come across. Your energy was not the usual fiducian, and yet you did not really resemble a type that I could identify very quickly. You did kind of resemble, like you could be a fiducian just based on your looks, and that's why I was a bit confused, and I didn't want to make a kind of hasty judgment. And I also, I must confess that at that point I kind of lost a little bit of confidence in my typology. This was over a year ago, and whenever I come across someone that doesn't fit in very well, I always start to sort of question my own sort of model, and thinking that perhaps this isn't, perhaps I haven't really done a good job on it. But then every now and then I meet someone that just fits so perfectly. Like later on when we talk with Ashkan, I think that conversation is still on the channel, and he was an obvious fiducian. I mean, it was very easy to just spot that. And but now I know after learning more about you, that you fit the Misericordem pattern, and perhaps you want to share how you first came across my model and what you thought when you first saw the types. I noticed that you at first identified with Urbanum, for example.
Yeah, I think I came across your model. Yeah, it was because I watched the Leo Gura evaluation. Yeah, and then I pressed the other videos, and then I came across it at random, but it caught my interest. I think I first identified much with Urbanum, I think, because I could recognize the neurotic and like the aspects of me that wants to please others and wants to fit in. I think it was that made me think I was an Urbanum. But then when I saw the Fiducian video, I could also recognize, like it felt more like me in a way than Urbanon. I don't really remember why, but I identified with it more. And
You were
Mr.
dreaming and kind of wanting to escape reality or something you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, that was the point. Like wanting to escape reality, I think uh, was the factor that was strongest, that I can identify with strongest. And I didn't identify with Misericordem at all, because the examples in that video uh, were so unlike me in a way, like I figured, because they seem so extreme and like negative in a way that
Yeah,
I didn't, yeah.
I used very extreme examples in my first videos. And of course, I did not. It's hard to tell whether or not I have really captured the essence of the types or of the energies, to be more specific. We are referring them to types now, and we are referring to you as a Misericordem-type. But if we are going to be more accurate, it's not like you actually are Misericordem. You are running on the Misericordem energy. And also you have two more auxiliary energies that you're also running on. But yeah, in order to just simplify it, we speak of types, or that you are this and that type, to sort of signify your primary energy. But you when you were talking with me in that first video, you asked how to work with these energies, and if I could help you figure out your secondary energies. And at that in that conversation, I didn't really have a good answer to how to work with them, because the way I think of it is that, I mean, how you work with them is kind of individual. Once you learn about yourself, you have to do the best. You have to make that decision yourself. The usefulness of a typology such as this is that it should give you a different view on others, like make you more curious, more perhaps more understanding of others, make you relax more, because you understand that you might be projecting and thinking the way I judge things, they will judge about me. But when you learn that people also can be so different, you think that, oh, that person, that type of person isn't really judgmental in that way, and that way they will not really care about things that I'm worried about, and all of these things. I think that the usefulness is more in a kind of social and relational context rather than what you yourself should do with them. But of course, it can also be useful to know how to what your blind spots are if we measure against a kind of enlightened or developed standard. Then you can see kind of where each type sort of falls short in their own way. But a lot of times this has to be kind of intuitive, and we have to be prepared to be a bit kind of creative with it and explore by ourselves. Because I don't like this idea either that certain people will tell you, like, since you're this, you're supposed to do this. I kind of want to leave a bit more of a freedom and an exploratory element to the energies, so that I don't really provide all the answers and things like that. And so that's all my thoughts on sort of how to work with it. I might still talk about that, or if I come up with something, but I don't think that is sort of the right question.
You mean it's framed in a way that is like it presupposes an answer that isn't like applicable,
That is,
like
yeah,
even
that isn't obvious. So that is kind of. I mean, I'm sure I could say something about it, and if something comes to mind, if I can see some way. I mean, I do have theories and ideas of what sort of the strengths of these types are, and how they contribute to making humanity a more kind of balanced and kind of more interesting species than if we simply regard human beings as male and female or such sort of simplified stereotypes. It kind of enforces a kind of complexity where people might not see variation otherwise, so to speak. Which sounds a bit contradictory, because obviously it can impose a kind of limit in how you view people as well. So you sort of have to be careful there. But when I was not sure what your configuration is, because you had not typed yourself correctly, and I wasn't sure what type you were either. And as the conversation progressed, we started talking about a lot of other things, not just your type. But there were some moments where you really you sounded kind of fragile, and I thought this doesn't really resemble fiducian, even if you have some kind of unusual configuration. And afterwards, I started thinking, once the conversation was over, and I had time to reflect on it, I thought that perhaps your original assessment of being urbanum was more correct. And I also thought that perhaps Misericordem might not be impossible. In fact, it was those three sort of main energies that I saw as possible. I didn't see the other ones as likely. You might still be fiducian, but I also thought more and more that perhaps urbanum or Misericordem. And I didn't really, I mean, I remember you being a bit impatient. I don't know if you were impatient, but it sort of come across that way in text when we talked on Skype, and you said, can't you just tell by how I look? Like you just wanted to know. And the only person I had met that you sort of resemble was a young cousin of mine who I had identified as an urbanum. But now I'm thinking that he is actually, I think he is similar to you. And I think he is a Misericordem too, but because I thought he was an urbanum, and this was based very much on how he had a lot more energy when he was a kid. But then there is this transition when you are sort of 14, 15, where the childhood energy kind of disappears, and the person has more of a mellow energy that is especially noticeable in types like abstractum or Misericordem, where they become much more sort of inhibited and kind of blonde. He sort of comes across as a bit blonde, but I still thought that might be urbanum, and that he might be sort of careful how other people view him, and therefore he doesn't stand out very much. But I think that a lot of that applies, and I understand that a lot of that applies also to Misericordem. And I did what I usually do afterwards when I kind of want to confirm what type someone is. I asked them the question of how would you describe yourself from the beginning? You know, if you didn't know anything about yourself, if you forget all the theories you may have read and all interpretations based on medical diagnosis. I'm talking psychiatrics or other typologies, and not even use terms like introversion or extroversion or intellectual. If you don't use any of these words and sort of just try to talk about what you consider to be your main struggles in life and how you view yourself. Because I don't believe that people actually are all that blind to themselves. I mean, some people, some types more than others, may be kind of sort of blind to themselves, but I think that a lot of people actually know who they are, and whenever they cannot find their type in a typology, it's not because they don't understand themselves, and sometimes it's not even because they don't understand the typology, but it's because either the typology is simply inadequate or wrong or not very good, or it's the descriptions, the way they are formulated. And I will say that in my case, I could have done a better job on Misericordem, and I can still probably improve, and I am still improving the more I learn. But I could tell that you actually, I did guess that. I'm going to read what you wrote as an answer to this question. And you said that you describe yourself as wanting to fit into social context, even at the expense of your own values, and that did sound like urbanum. So I started to understand how you sort of identified with those traits. And you said that you were at the same time interested in questioning ideas and social norms. And of course, that leans in more towards urbanum, but it also can be, I mean, that can be anyone really. And you said that you escaped into fantasy worlds, and you also sometimes had actively acted against authoritarian tendencies in school through quiet rebellion. And perhaps you want to talk about
that. Like I think the rebelliousness in my school years was more. It wasn't super intense or anything like that. It was more that I believe that a lot of the like what do you say when the teachers tell you something without a reason and you're just supposed to accept it. Also my dad has done that a lot, like when I was a kid, which I like. I didn't like being told something without knowing why, or like so that made me take them less seriously, like as I didn't see them as authorities, which made me like not care so much in school in general. I think that's what I meant with like quiet. It wasn't like I actively challenged them or anything.
I understand. You were not really conforming. I mean, I have talked about how urbanum is sort of often an A student. They like to not only fit in, but kind of master and be the best, so to speak. And obviously, that doesn't fit with you very well here. And you also said that you could do directly antisocial things like manipulating people and steal unlocked bikes. What did you mean by manipulating?
I'm not sure what I meant when I said. I think like I don't think I manipulate people now as much as I did when I was a kid, because like I think when I was a kid I didn't care so much about truth, so I could like withhold stuff to get what I want from other people. But I think since I slowly started to value truth more and more, and then the manipulation, I don't think it applies so much to me.
It can be difficult to base your character on what you did as a kid, because as kids are often very similar and often do very sort of spontaneous and selfish things.
Yeah. But I think like no, I don't think I actively manipulate people, but the closest I can come to it is like when I'm about to, like when I don't want any like social friction or something, that I can like withhold stuff from people just to keep the status quo or something. But I don't play with people. Like I don't try to like manipulate too much.
Yeah, and then you said that you have a fear of being. You said that you had a fear of being regarded as inauthentic or immoral by yourself or by others, and especially others you respect. And that made me think of Misericordem because of the kind of immoral and well, it can be, I guess it can be an element of fiduciam as well, but I'm not really sure since they are on that side, which is sort of idealistic. The fiduciam, Misericordem, and Meritum can have a kind of hang up on being good and wanting to be good and obviously avoid being bad or doing bad stuff. But it seems that fiduciam is a bit more sort of masculine and might care less since they are less social. They are less concerned with social stuff, and that is also the way you can sort of tell the difference between fiduciam and urbanum, because urbanum both tend to be very verbal and can be very sort of expressive and talkative, which has to do. I usually explain that by saying that since they are the localizations of each of their sphere, they tend to have more energy, but urbanum tends to be more sort of conventionally intellectual or kind of smart or competent in the way they express themselves, unless they sort of are comedians or something. But while fiduciam can be a bit more sort of wild and have strange ideas and talk without really caring what people think. Someone like Greta Thunberg or Stefan Molyneux or Jordan B. Peterson, they are not exactly conventional, and they are not trying to sort of please people or come across as so they are not like well-spoken presidents like Obama, for example. So that's kind of how you can tell the difference. And I would say that it's probably more likely that fiduciam will get bullied in school than urbanum, from what I have seen. And then so I can understand why you went away more and more away from urbanum. And then you said that you felt bad, or perhaps even a bit nauseous. I'm not sure how to translate the word, of being accused, but that you eventually felt so bad that you no longer took it seriously.
Yeah, I think that wasn't a specific. Was that like the same message, or was that a?
Well, it was. I have them in chronological order, but they may not be from the same message.
Yeah, because because that was in relation to one person that accused me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can skip that. But I'm thinking that. How did you, when you say that you felt bad, what do you mean by that? Did you actually feel sort of ill and like, or was it just that you felt like you're a bad person, or?
No, I think the worst. Yeah, I think I felt like I was. I think it was the fear of inauthenticity or something, that like I wasn't a real person or something. That I don't know. When I was accused, I felt like I was just that all of me was fake, and I was afraid that that was true. And then, if I remember it correctly, I like it became so intense, intensely negative for me to view it like that. So it sort of like flipped, and then I watched it more objectively, like it was happening to someone else, and then I didn't care anymore. Like after that happened.
Yeah, I would say that fiduciams will not be as bothered by that. None of the types that are sort of more on the antisocial or masculine spectrum, like the sapient M types and Exedium, and people with Exedium in their configuration, they are not going to be bothered, and especially since if they have Exedium in their configuration, they will often be pretty bold and don't really have much issue with inauthenticity, so to speak. Let's see here. Oh yeah, and you said you had taken some psychedelics, and you told me that you had a very disturbing or unpleasant trip where you went into your own moral character.
Åh nej.
What,
Det pausade, men should we just continue?
yeah,
I think,
there's nothing paused here, so.
No, okay. It was just a bad connection. I think we can. It says bad connection, but
Well, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you said that it went into this trip, whatever you saw or experience you had, went into your moral character, truthful living, and your meat eating. Or did you eat meat because you stopped eating meat?
Yeah, I stopped eating meat in relation
you were
to that.
avoiding problems. Also,
Yeah.
So these were things that you confronted about yourself during this trip.
Yeah, they came up as.
Perhaps you can tell me about that trip from the beginning, because you have written a bunch of stuff here. I'm kind of curious about your own character and the whole thing about the suffering of animals and how you became vegetarian and you ran out and there was some kind of feeling of impending doom and all of this stuff. It did feel like you were kind of sensitive. It implied Misericordem very much, I thought. So please share.
Well, it manifests itself, like the confrontation with my own moral character manifests itself as a like psychotic delusion that my friend was testing it somehow, because he said that he was gonna cook food for me, and for some reason I thought, and he said that it was gonna be vegan, and he was like, I don't want to make you think about eating animals when you're tripping or something. And I thought that was like the beginning of the test, testing my moral character. And I was afraid that he would like keep feeding me, but increase the level of like intensity in it. And I was afraid that like the next course he would feed me would be like a vegetarian, and the course after that would be a chicken, and like the course after that would be a cow, and then it would be a human, or like it's like it spiraled out, and I thought it was really like because up to that point I think I ate meat, and I could see the hypocrisy in me doing it, because I wouldn't like I wouldn't want to be conscious of the entire process of the like animal dying and stuff, and then me eating it. It felt like such a morally reprehensible thing to be a part of. So that made me like scared, I think, and that's why I like ran out of the apartment, because I didn't want to take the test that I thought I was being subject to. Yeah. But then when I got out, I got this increasing feeling that the entire society I lived in is corrupt or something. I got this like dystopic feeling, because like I walked around and watched commercials, and like people seem so unfriendly on the street, which made me think that I like it made me think that the human race was a bad thing or something, and that I was like a danger somehow. But I didn't have a specific like reason for thinking that. But I thought that the people I met clearly didn't wish me well, or at least they didn't care about me. And that was before but then after that I got the idea that I would probably die or something worse than that. Because if everyone is so unfriendly, and maybe they'll like maybe something terrible will happen, or maybe a car will like suddenly crash into me and I will be badly injured. And I don't really remember what the logic was, but it was more like discontinuous. It was very dreamlike in a way, because it was very irrational.
And you did mention something about, let's see, did you go into a train or something? You said you could feel the emotional intensity of some passengers.
Yeah. So I escaped into because I thought the street was dangerous, because it was snowy out, and it was ice everywhere, and cars were going fast, and I felt like, and at that point I just felt like a very simple organism that just wanted to have warmth and like avoid pain. So I was like, okay, but if I go into the subway, that's at least a system, and it's warm in there. So I escaped into the subway. But when I got into the train, I felt like everyone looked really sad, and like they looked down into the floor, and they were like pale and white, which made me horrified, because there was something like doomsday. It was like a feeling of doom there too, because it felt like they had nothing to live for, and that energy just didn't vibe with me good at all. And I thought maybe something terrible will happen to them, or one of us at least, because why would they else be so sad, and like distraught, like. But yeah, that's how I interpret it. In reality, they probably weren't that sad. I think it was like I projected it onto them.
Yeah. Well, if you are in the Greatum sphere primarily, it does sound sort of logical that you would feel a kind of identification with this kind of mammalian nature of just wanting to feel warmth and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
That you can sort of read about in the sort of limbic system. I'm not sure how tied to the sort of brains that these energies are, but it's sort of all you have to go on if you're going to try to make something have them correlate to something. Yeah, and then you said you've always known that you have want to listen to your own conscience.
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 Yeah.
Conscience in English sounds so similar to consciousness, so it's a bit confusing.
I agree.
Conscious and strive towards the good, and that made me also think either fiduciam or misericordem. And you said that you had a lot of curiosity and will to understand the hidden and to understand things. And of course, that also, I mean, it fits with any of the sapientium types, and it fits with, well, it can fit with any type, but it's very sort of typical sapientium, but also misericordem, since it is very close to that sphere. Out of all of the rest of the energies. And avoidance of problem. You said that you had a tendency to put your head in the sand, and I thought that was kind of interesting, because that wasn't my impression of Misericordem up to that point. that they would, because they felt so obsessed with problems almost, at least when they stick out. But I guess there could be specific configurations, and I guess obviously I do think that you have fiducium. I think if we talk about your configuration, I would say that your configuration, what we have arrived at is that you have fiducium and corpus in your configuration. And that makes you obviously a bit more soft and inhibited version of Misericordem. But let's continue before we get into that more. Naive idealism and wishful thinking, impatience, a need to express yourself artistically and musically, a strong need to be loved, appreciated, and accepted. And again, that goes back to your identification with urbanum there. But obviously, that goes for almost all the types that are influenced by the Gratum sphere, but especially those that are in the Gratum sphere. So it also applies to libidinum and Misericordem. Weakness in confrontation. Yeah, weakness in confrontation. I did bring that up in the fiducium profile, but I feel that perhaps I think that you are perhaps more weak in confrontation, because at least fiducium can be very critical and aggressive with their minds and in debates. It's more that they have difficulty standing up in person, and so I mean, I guess that's not a very good defining characteristic of any particular type, but I mean, there are many men who can have difficulty with confrontation. That is why the morem types are more described as being sort of those who confront things physically, so to speak. And then you said that you were pretty good at forgiving and being lenient towards people. Perhaps you could talk about that a bit, because that implies a love type, someone who is compassionate.
Yeah, I think I don't hold grudges at all, really, with people. And you asked me before this video if I had like problems with egolessness or something like that, or like selflessness. I think it can tie into the lenient thing, because like I think I'm easily exploited too, because I'm so like the dark side of that is that because I see like I can excuse behaviors of other people easily, which is both good, because then like I can allow people to make mistakes and to not to judge them too hard for it, and like but also it can make it makes me for an easy target of exploitation too, I think.
I think that's we did talk about that, and I did ask you about if you had any kind of selflessness, because we arrived at I thought that you had corpus in your configuration, and corpus was another thing that I hadn't really the way I had described corpus in the beginning as being kind of this stoic, protective, sort of altruistic type. I hadn't got into the kind of inner sensitivity that I think people who have corpus in their configuration, they usually, I'm not sure they actually identify much with the stoicism, and instead I think they actually identify more with the sensitive core that kind of makes them kind of very sort of prudent and a bit pedantic, and and stuck in a kind of rigid habit. And we will go into your rigidity later on, but that was something that was not visible when I talked to you, and it's not visible now either, but we'll get into that. So that's another reason to think corpus is in your configuration. And obviously, if you have corpus, then you have more of the gratum sphere influence, since corpus is a gratum more a mixture, so to speak, and that adds to sort of the whole identification with gratum types, like, for example, urbanum.
Yeah. That is the infinity column, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see here. Easily, you said that you were easily offended, and sensitivity that you want to hide. So you did identify with the sensitivity, and yeah, I think that we should talk here about how when I actually met you in person, because I was invited, and you two, we were both invited to Ashkan's seminar, and which I have some video clips of, and I didn't include when you criticized Ashkan, but we can see you on stage as well. And when I first met you there, I was surprised by how tall you were. You were really tall. Not that that indicates a particular type, but that was kind of interesting. And then when I held my talk, I didn't really pay much attention to people, but I did notice that you seemed to sit very straight and sort of pay attention. And this became even more noticeable later on when Ashkan went up on stage, and we were both sitting next to each other on the front row. And I did notice that you were sitting very sort of with a straight back and listening very sort of almost rigidly. And you can see on the video clips that you have a kind of this kind of Misericordem stare that you can see in photographs of, for example, Franz Kafka. Not sure how you pronounce his name. And so when I did think at the end of that night that I have to inform you that you are a Misericordem, because I had noticed that pattern in other Misericordems, and it's definitely not fiducium. And I guess we were still sort of we hadn't talked about it a lot, but we had still not really questioned whether or not you were a fiducium up to that point. So I informed you about that later on, and yeah, I asked you about it, and you said that you hadn't really noticed it, but that you had tried meditation. You told me that you had trouble relaxing, and perhaps you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So the question, there were 3 questions, right? Can you take the questions again? Because
I just want to talk about your difficulty relaxing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is a problem that I think is part of my Misericordem, and I've learned to accept that it's like up until that's one of the things that I actually learned because of this model was like up until this point I've always had difficulty relaxing, and I thought that it was something that I was just gonna try to like force away or something, like by distracting myself or like drinking alcohol or going to like I don't know. I tried to avoid it, but now I realize that maybe that's just part of how I am, because I really have a difficulty to relax bodily. Like even if I lie down and try to unclench my muscles, I still feel like in my stomach that there's some tightness that seems to not go away whatever I do. Like,
Yeah, and that seems to be related to the high sensitivity and that's also where you really compelled me to look into the limbic system, because I figured that I did remember that it said something about anxiousness, which I hadn't really paid much attention to. But you sort of, because I realized I had to update my Misericordem profile, and that's when I really started to think that, when I read about the limbic system, which sort of corresponds to the great sphere, when we make an analogy with the human brain, it did say that it had this flight or fight response. Very often people say that the flight or fight response, they refer to it as going to the reptilian brain, the sort of basic fear of survival and this stuff. But actually, that stuff is the emotional brain. It is the mammals that run away quickly when some predator, and even not just a predator, anything, some hard noise, they just run away. While reptiles are actually pretty desensitized and don't really, they are a bit more slow. Yeah, I think that, and there are also a lot of other typologies that refers to sort of fear as the core of the more intellectual types. But I feel that anxiety makes more sense, and is also supported by what we know about the brain, that it has to do with the emotional brain and the great sphere in this case. And so I do think that Misericordem probably, since I have seen a lot of Misericordem have difficulty relaxing, and sometimes you can see a rigidity in other types as well, but it does not really come across in the same way exactly. And and also because, as I said, if you have corpus in your configuration, then you have a bit more influence from the great sphere in addition, that can contribute to that as well. While you have, for example, meritum or exirium, you will not be as rigid or difficulty relaxing.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that also makes some sense with corpus, like they also perhaps have some difficulty relaxing, which makes them kind of want to desensitize themselves even more, since that is the specialization of their sphere, kind of desensitize and become less concerned with things, like stop thinking, stop paying attention, just take action. So I think that my descriptions of almost all the types improved based on what I learned from our conversations.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
And you also said, you mentioned, you shared that, because that's when I realized that my cousin also probably was more likely to be Misericordem than Urbanum. And so I wondered about that, how some Misericordem types can appear to be kind of unexpressive, come across as a kind of blonde, not really making an impression. And you said that you don't like to stand out, because if you could get hurt, people could attack you or criticize you.
Yes.
Perhaps you want to share.
Well, yeah, I feel like if I manifest too much in the world, since I feel like I'm this very fragile thing, and the more I expose myself, the more easily I could get hurt. I suppose, and I fear that will have disastrous consequences for some reason.
Yeah, that reminded me of the hedgehog, the metaphor of the hedgehog's dilemma, that when two hedgehogs try to get close to one another, they injure each other with their sharp spines.
Yeah.
So
That was from an anime, right? So
yeah, it was. It's an anime director called Hideaki Anno, who made this famous show called Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion. And the main character from that show is kind of infamous for being very sensitive, and they use the metaphor of the hedgehog's dilemma to describe him. Originally, I think that the hedgehog's dilemma comes from, I think it comes from Freud or maybe Arthur Schopenhauer. I mean, it is also a psychoanalysis term, I think.
Yeah, Schopenhauer is also a Misericordem, right?
Yeah, I think he might be. I think he might be. I thought he was abstractum at first, but yeah, I don't really know that much about him. But the more I learn, I suspect that he might actually be, because he was complaining very much about. He had a very pessimistic view of reality and very concerned with suffering. That I think is a bit more misericordemic than abstractum. Abstractum is a bit more kind of mentally desensitized and have more problem with indifference, so to speak. Yeah, I think that's it. Perhaps you want to share if you have found some way to sort of. Perhaps I can ask you if you have found some way to work or make use of these energies as we have identified them. We did. I mean, since you were aware that you were sort of escaping into fantasy, and that you have this interest in spirituality, obviously, that part of you do have fiducians. So confronting fiduciamic tendencies is not irrelevant. It does apply to you as well. Perhaps not as much as this problem with relaxation and dealing with the fact that you are kind of sensitive. In developing ourselves, we need to both develop more ways to become more sensitive to the extent that we are very often insensitive to people, and we also need to develop a kind of a thicker skin to also become more desensitized. And for you, it is of course more relevant to become desensitized, or at least sort of endure more and accept the fact that you are sensitive and make use of it. But perhaps you can share a bit about that before we.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, because I don't think I have like I don't think I've become better at all in that area of my life. But I do think I notice my sensitivity more, and in that sense, it's easier to detach from, because I can like see that this is just some cluster of reactivity that. Just noticing it helps, but I haven't like I still have problems with it.
Yeah, but a lot of improvement happens simply because of awareness. Awareness is a very powerful thing. So that is the most important aspect. And the way I think what I told you were that obviously the way you work with fiduciam, to the extent we can say something in general, is of course to, I guess, try to become a bit more grounded and not just go towards more exciting cosmic things. And with corpus, I think that something similar to Misericordem can apply, where you try to not let things bother you. I think they also have some issues with kind of softness, soft-heartedness that probably has a lot of fear. And corpus is, I mean, it's interesting to me to know how people who have corpus secondary experience it, since I don't have it myself, and I'm not sure how exactly you would identify it. except from the external. I can only go by how more of the gratum sphere they have in them would of course imply corpus. And yeah, this stuff you told me that you kind of like the idea of helping people, of protecting people. You remember?
I don't remember that, but I think that applies. And another thing about corpus is I think I notice it mostly when like other people suggests to like do new things that I haven't like. I think I'm quite open-minded to new ideas and stuff, but if someone wants me to try a new thing that I haven't done, I'm very conservative, and I'd rather just keep doing my habits. Like I'm very habitual as a person, and I resist breaking them, or I don't want to like mess around too much with my habits. I don't know if that's corpus, but it feels like it is.
And then the main issue, of course, is to handle the Misericordem energy, which again is something you shouldn't identify with, but it's more like your main fuel or energy or a process, so to speak, which you have learned now to sort of detach from a bit, so that you don't get caught up in it in the same way that perhaps you were before.
Yeah.
And like I said, it has more to do to find some way to deal with this hypersensitivity, which I think I nailed that aspect as the central issue, so to speak, that defines this particular energy.
The hypersensitivity.
Yeah, hypersensitivity.
I was talking about corpus or about Misericordem?
Misericordem. I talked about Misericordem because sometimes I also described it as kind of compassionate, that it was a compassionate energy, and I even named it. Misericordem means compassion, but I think that the sensitivity is more precise in defining the essence of the energy, which explains both the compassion and sometimes the hostility or some Misericordem types can be a bit aggressive, but obviously as we have to conclude, that means a different configuration very often, I think. Since you don't talk much, you haven't really expressed much. You told me that you were very sort of forgiving, and I know that some my experience with some Misericordem types is that they can have very a very long grievance with certain things and certain people, where they remember things and don't forgive. That is not by their behavior. So I think that the configuration plays in a lot, and makes it very difficult to define these types. And so again, I would say it's not really your fault that you misidentified in the beginning. It was partly because of my own descriptions, but I think you at least agree with me now that you are Misericordem.
Yes, I agree. Like sometimes I still have doubts that I am Urbanum, but less and less. I think Misericordem is what I am.
Yeah. And I remember, because I also remember that you felt that you didn't look like Misericordem, and I kind of agree with you. That's what was a bit confusing in the beginning. That made me think that you kind of look like you actually could be a fiducium based just on a photograph or similar. But then I noticed that there's a lot of the way your face looks that is similar to Franz Kafka. And I thought that he was a abstractum at first, but the more when I read his diary, I thought, no, this is not abstractum, because Franz Kafka had been diagnosed as possibly being schizoid, but also possibly borderline. And I think that borderline is a bit more Misericordem. I kind of have difficulty perceiving abstractum being diagnosed as borderline, but yeah, I really wasn't sure, but
I think
but now
borderline
I'm sure that he is Misericordem. And since you wanted an example, I did kind of show you.
Yeah. I think borderlines tends to be more like physically intense and like expressive, which abstractum isn't.
There was some kind of attachment he had to some women or some woman, Kafka. I don't remember it right now, so I don't want to go into it. Perhaps I will talk a bit when we come to, if I make more videos on the types, because he is an interesting example, since he is a Misericordem that might be confused with abstractum. And it's kind of interesting that we did not confuse you with abstractum. I think that sometimes, I guess I have been pretty good at least describing abstractum, but partly because I know abstractum very well, since that's my primary energy. So it's been interesting to instead find a confusion between fiduciam and Misericordem. But I think that will come up more and more, because I've noticed that a lot of people are identifying with fiduciam, and I guess it's perhaps I made the description of fiduciam too general, and perhaps I mean, there is this trap. Every typology seems to fall into this trap of making people identify the most with those people who are kind of intellectual and open-minded for some reason. The INTP, INTJ, and the Myers-Briggs, and the schizoid and bioenergetics, and so on. So I don't know. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say about why I still sometimes suspect that I could be having like Orbanum tendencies is because you described the sort of like happy Nazi thing that Orbanum can have when they like try to make everyone in the environment reflect good on them or something like that.
Yeah, they want to control their environment a bit, so that they appear good and.
I can identify with that, and I can like I think sometimes it was more in the beginning when like Misericordem was it seemed like they had a very negative outlook on everything, or like on life.
Yeah, I was really extreme on that they found everything terrible and loveless, and some really are like that, but you have shown me that they can even lean more towards the positive. So yeah, that really, I really need to change that, and I will be mindful of that in the future.
Yeah. Shall we stop here, maybe?
Yeah. I just want to say that regardless of your doubts, you are a Misericordem.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you for having this conversation with me, and yeah, take care.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.